You're a very busy guy in Ireland. I know you
Hmm.
do television, and you made a movie between Once and this film. You're
Yeah.
best known here for Once. We've all
Yeah.
seen Once, right? We love Once.
Sorry. Oh,
Um,
thank you very much.
yes.
Cheers.
I would like to ask you though. Once obviously is a really classic musical,
Mhm.
and now here you are returning to the subject of music, the subject
Yeah.
of the music industry. Is what's your connection to music? Why has that become so dominant in your choices as a writer?
I guess that I finally sort of resolved the kind of the part of me. I was in a band when I left school, and it never quite sat with me. I wanted to be the lead singer, but I was the bass player. I think every bass player probably wants that a little bit, and
They all become directors. You know,
yeah,
right.
there's quite a few actually. And I was never quite comfortable in the band. And then I left and I went off and I got a camcorder and I started making some stuff on TV and films. And I never got it quite right until once in a way. I had a TV show which I made with my brother and a friend of mine in Dublin, and it had a lot of music in it, and it was great and it did very well for us. But you know, for me, it was sort of like people would give out to me about having too much music in the film, in the TV show. There's too much score going on, and I was like, you ain't seen nothing yet. My next film is gonna be a wall-to-wall musical, and it was Once, and that sort of came out. And it seemed to me I sort of satisfied both the filmmaker and the musician in that film. And again, then with Begin Again, it's sort of, I don't know, it's strange. It's sort of a dual sort of thing there. That I get that sort of, because I always watched movies and I thought that as a kid I would watch these fantastic, particularly sort of golden age Hollywood films where the scores were so lush, and you had Dmitri Tiomkin or Franz Waxman or Bernard Herrmann, these giants of motion picture scoring, and I always thought it was the director who wrote those scores when I was a kid, because they were like, it's so good and it's so in touch with what's going on screen, that's got to be the director.
Unless it's Charlie Chaplin, no.
Unless, exactly, yeah. And then I figured that one out, and I was like, oh, so they commission music. So, and I was surprised by that, and I always found that to be a little bit sad in a strange kind of way. And I always thought that sort of the picture and the music was always sort of married in an inseparable kind of way. And so I guess in a way, coming back to the musical form, I found a way of sort of childishly putting that back together again.
I think a big surprise, maybe for us here in the audience, is Kira can really sing.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's terrific in this.
she's
And
great.
so, just as a question for a director and maybe casting,
Mhm.
what comes first? I mean, are you casting her as an actor? Are you
Mhm.
casting her? I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
the way you shoot musicals, the performer has to be able to sing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's naturalistic. So,
To some degree, that's
did
very
you
true.
audition her?
I went and met Kira in London, and I had always sort of thought it doesn't matter too much. I don't, you know, I don't. It's acting first in this role for Greta. She's got to be able to act, and the singing can be a little less because it's not Ellen Page. It's not Judy Garland getting off a bus. Literally, the character wasn't. I mean, she says that line, but it's also true of what I was trying to write, which was a character who wasn't gonna sing, gonna dance. She was like a little more quiet, and it was more about the lyrics and more about the song than the performance. And she was always going to have this amazing love of her life, played by Adam as Dave, and he's the real performer. He's the natural sort of performer. So as long as she could hold a sort of a baseline tune, as long as it wasn't like, oh my God, stop that, whack it, it was okay. And we worked with that, and I got a great voice coach from LA, Roger Love, who just worked with her and explained where her voices come from and how to breathe and where your diaphragm and your muscles, and a lot of it's just gym work. It's just training and working at those muscles.
Did the songs also come first for you? I mean, or does the story?
In life or in this movie, the story was first. In Once, I kind of knew exactly, like Falling Slowly, I was writing around and creating that sort of scene. It was very sort of married, that process. In this, I wrote the screenplay first and left gaps for the songs, and I would ring Judd up and I would say, so I've got this kind of idea for a song here, and there's a slug here. So there were like 8 gaps in the screenplay, and we dropped Tetris-like these songs into it. So it was fun. It was going off then to commission the songs, sort of knowing who she was and knowing what sort of character she was. Absolutely, yeah.
Meanwhile, then you have Mark Ruffalo, who's just this exuberant
Yeah.
force of nature.
The Columbo of the music industry. Yeah.
Right. just is so comfortable in every single role I see him. I'm just shocked. It's almost like he doesn't need the scruffy beard. He doesn't need this. I mean, he's just always
Yeah.
so like effortlessly
Yeah.
cool. Like
I
that
know.
must have been
Just everything you're saying just annoys me more because part of being a director is that you have romance with women on set and woo them with your directorial magic. And then Mark Ruffalo is standing next to you and nobody sees you, frankly. It's like I was telling you outside, girls would come, like a first AD would come up to get me to come onto set and I'd be standing beside Mark and she'd like go, "Hey Mark, have you seen John anywhere?" And Mark would be like, "He's just here." He'd be like, "No, he's not there, Mark. And I go, "Oh." And I'd actually find myself sort of like just standing quite far away from him, just in my own little light, No, he's annoyingly good looking and he's annoyingly nice. And he's resolved as a person. He's an evolved man, which is just annoying. And I was just going home every day looking in the mirror and going, forget it. It's just, there's no point,
He's like one of these people who sees a vision and a shape for things and an order. And you do a very sophisticated thing when you add his arrangement when he's hearing her for the first time and we hear the strings and we hear the drums and.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really beautiful gesture. Where did that idea come from?
That idea came from, the idea that producers and A&R men, hear things. And they say that, and we always say that, I see this or I hear this. But literally, there are certain people who almost in a sort of a synesthetic sort of way will hear these instruments when they hear a song. When somebody plays them a song on guitar, it's not that they hear it metaphorically, they actually physically hear strings coming in here. And I've heard that expression, and I've heard it in relation to people like Stevie Wonder, who I think famously hears whole arrangements in his head and can't get them out of his head, and it drives him crazy. It was very interesting. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to, what's the cinematic version of that? Because hearing it is one thing, and then it was sort of like, why don't we just see what's inside his head as opposed to just sort of hear it? So
there were very few sequences. I mean, as a musician myself and as a fan of music, I love movies about making music and that moment of creation. And you think about scenes in movies like Amadeus or Hustle and Flow when you see people in the studio working and developing something. And I feel like that moment is right up there.
Well, that's the thing. I think that films, there's that idea from early movies, and I love montages in movies where it's sort of, like in the South Park way, let's have a montage here because we don't want to see the whole thing happen. And I love those old 30s movies where Humphrey Bogart says, let's run some questions around town, and then some music plays and you see people interviewing and asking people stuff in a montage and then they get an answer. But I think for what sometimes montages miss or directors miss is that they don't have the courage of their convictions in terms of the idea that audiences are quite happy to watch things being made. You know the way like a painter will paint something in a movie and it'll dissolve and the painting is done or something like this. The before and after.
And it's like you missed the best part.
In a way.
The process.
In a way, audiences are quite happy to sit back and I think a lot of directors think, oh, I'll bore them. But actually you won't bore them. And in fact, with the montage, it's a little bit patronizing in a way to sort of, and I think that actually more and more, I think maybe it's a technological thing or I think kids are really fascinated to see how things are made. How is that done? How is a song written? How is an album put together? How is a hole dug or a painting painted? In a way, I think that's sort of, if you look back at the very, very early days of cinema when the camera was first being cranked up, the first thing they did was just show things happening in the world.
Train arrives at
Trains,
station.
exactly, Niagara
An
Falls.
Oscar winner.
Yeah. These things, and then obviously it changed and we started telling stories, and it's almost like things are coming fully around again to sort of putting cameras on things and leaving them there and letting things happen. I think it's fascinating, yeah.